on our screen here. We'll start our City Council meeting. As we begin today's meeting, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the Treaty Territory of Mississaugas, the Credit First Nation, and before them the traditional territory, the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We are honored to live, work, and enjoy this land. Please all rise for the singing of the National Anthem, to be followed by a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Welcome to our regular council meeting of April 10th, 2019. A few things I want to acknowledge before we start. Last week when we were here, Councillor Harkirat Singh was a young bachelor. I just want to note that that's no longer the case. He was married on the weekend, and it was a great celebration. I want to assure the fire chief, although it looked really full, they did not break fire code, but it was congratulations, Councillor Harkirat Singh, on your marriage. I should also mention, Councillor Willens and Bowman asked me to do this. Their beloved Maple Leafs are starting the playoffs tomorrow, and we wish them well. Yeah. Members of council, there are a few agenda changes identified on the package in front of you. I will ask the city clerk to review the changes for today's agenda since its publication last Friday.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of staff, and the public attending or watching, these are the changes for today's council meeting. There is the addition of a proclamation under item 5.2C, a proclamation for National Volunteer Week, April 7th to 13th, 2019. In regard to the Planning and Development Committee meeting, which was just held this past Monday, there are two bylaws to be added to the agenda. Bylaw 77-2019 to amend zoning bylaw 270-2004 as amended for 2138436 Ontario Incorporated Humphreys Planning Group for the south side of Mayfield and west of McBean Drive in Ward 10. And there's bylaw 78-2019 to amend sign bylaw 339-2002 as amended for a site-specific sign bylaw amendment and a mural approval for Palladium Orion Gate at 20 Biscayne Crescent in Ward 3. As well, there were items listed on the agenda for distribution, materials to be distributed at the meeting. Item 3.2, minutes from the special city council meeting of March 27th. Item 10.3, minutes from the Governance and Council Operations Committee meeting of this past Monday, April 8th. Item 10.4, it was intended to be minutes for Planning and Development Committee meeting from this past Monday, April 8th, but the recommendations are here for Council's approval. The minutes will be provided for receipt at the next meeting of Council on April 24th. And finally, item 18.1, a briefing report from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer regarding government relations matters, specifically in regard to the region appeal and provincial government matters. And those are the changes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you to our clerk. Are there any other additions, changes, or deletions to the agenda? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just I want to add a couple of items. One is a very quick, brief discussion on the monthly seniors transit pass, just to get an update from transit on when it will be implemented. And the second one is seating arrangements for the new council staffing model.
Okay. Okay. Any other additions or changes? All those in favor? We have a motion. So we need a councillor to move that. So we'll say Councillor Medeiros and Councillor Dillon put that forward. So approved as amended. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Seeing none, the clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. We're now ready to move to the next item of public business on today's council agenda, item 3, minutes. We have the following council minutes before us today. Minutes City Council regular meeting March 27th, 2019. Minutes City Council special meeting March 27th, 2019. And I have a motion from Councillor Willens, seconded by Councillor Bowman. All those in favor? Motion carries. Consent agenda. The items listed with an asterisk on the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial. The consent motion is to adopt this matter on today's agenda without the need for a separate discussion on the item, unless a member requests a separate discussion. Does any member wish to add an item or remove an item from the consent motion on the agenda? Councillor Plushy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to remove 8.1 from the consent agenda.
Okay. Councillor Singh.
I'm gonna remove 8.2 from consent.
Okay. 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 Our next item is 5.1, an announcement regarding the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame 2019 induction ceremony. Dean McLeod, Chair of the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame Committee, is here today for this announcement. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, city staff, fellow gallery invitees today. It's my pleasure to once again, and Jeff, thanks to you for sponsoring once again for us to come to announce this year the class of 2019, which is our 39th induction into the for athletes and builders and teams into the Sports Hall of Fame. We have 5 entrants this year, which now brings our total to 197, which consists of 117 athletes, 67 builders, 10 veterans, and 2 teams. The ceremony will take place, I've got a bad throat, excuse me. The ceremony takes place on May the 14th at the Rose Theatre, and Mr. Mayor, I have hand-delivered a letter of invite for yourself. I'm sure you're going to be there, and I send an invite to all councillors. It's your money that puts this up, and I thank you for the contribution. And we have 2 city staff here today that do a wonderful job of organizing the committee, Terry and Cole from city staff. We thank them for their ongoing contributions. The inductees we have today is Mr. Don Doan, Mr. Dave Doherty from baseball, Mike Hazen, lacrosse, Michael Meeks, basketball, and Robbie Taylor, swimming. 5 individuals that have spent a lifetime either contributing to sports as administration or in the athletic prowess to make their individual sports proud to be Bramptonians. I'm just going to speak, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to speak of Don Doan. Don is a longtime resident of Brampton, a longtime city employee, and before this committee that I chair became a committee of council, it was a group of individuals that had a sports interest that decided in 1978 that we needed a Sports Hall of Fame. Don and I keep referring to, and pardon my ignorance, but it's Parks and Recreation. That's what I'm used to back in the day. Don was an employee there. I had several encounters with Don negotiating lacrosse floor and ice time. And Don is a salt-of-the-earth individual, and with being stricken with ALS, I've never seen an individual that takes what he's been given and moves on. We had a ceremony at the Beast game, which a few of the councillors and Mr. Mayor were in attendance on Sunday, and Don was introduced there, and his wife left him at the Zamboni entrance, and she had tears coming down the eyes for the joy of Don being inducted. And Don has contributed to this Hall of Fame when he was a city employee, nothing to do with the city back then. And after he retired, he put his name forward to sit on our committee, and we're very, very pleased to be able to induct this individual along with the other four. So again, I want to thank Council for inviting me to represent the Hall of Fame. And again, the ceremony is at the Rose Theatre on May the 14th, and I'm just hoping that the councillors, three councillors that have sat on our committee in alphabetical order, Bowman, Fortini, and Willens, they've been there. Some of the other councillors have, so please make time to come out and see what it's all about. But what it is just glorifying the history of sport in Brampton, and it's long, and it's a very diversified Hall of Fame. I think with basketball going in this year for the first time, we have 31 different sports, and I think that's the most diversified Hall of Fame in Canada. I won't go on record as being positive, but I'm pretty sure it's up there. So again, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time, and if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
I see Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dean, and thank you for keeping it under 5 minutes. That's you did a good job today. Anybody who knows you.
Well, I still got 13 seconds.
You finished early. And I would also like to recognize the actual volunteers on the Sports Hall of Fame committee.
Sure.
Who meet and who select the individuals based on applications that come in from the public. So we're always looking for more applications to come in from the public, from Brampton athletes who have spent their time here in Brampton performing. And Dean, I like the way you said it's we're glorifying the athletes, but I'd also like to add that we're recognizing the importance of sports as part of our community. And for a community like Brampton, to have a Sports Hall of Fame that's been going over 35 years, and to have almost 200 athletes inducted, many of them very well-known names. If you take a tour of the Sports Hall of Fame, you may be surprised by the people who have called Brampton their home and have made it to the big leagues in all their sports. So again, I hope everybody can come out. Tickets are available at the Rose Theatre. We'd be happy to see everybody there. And again, Dean, thanks for your leadership on the committee.
If I could just say one more thing, Mr. Mayor, that on what Jeff has just mentioned, that we do scrutinize very thoroughly the applications that do come in. I'm on another Hall of Fame committee, the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame, and people come to me as a committee member or chair of this and say, like, how come so-and-so isn't in? And so-and-so's not in because nobody's taken the time to put a bio in for him so he can be duly recognized. And what we do have in our library now is probably the largest number of applicants that we've ever had. And that just is a reflection on the different sports in Brampton, recognizing that they do have athletes and builders that deserve or feel they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. And as an inductee myself to our Hall of Fame, I know the experience, and I know it's going to be next month. It's going to be a little emotional for some of them. Others it won't. People take emotions differently, but we are recognizing the history of sport, and to anybody in the city of Brampton that feels that they know somebody that could be recognized, please, and try to get them to put a bio in for them. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pertini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dean, thank you for all you do. I know you put a lot of work into it, and having over 31 different type of sports is a good achievement for our city. One thing I wanted to ask, I remember when I was on the committee, we were having some problems with not enough space at the Power Race Center. So we started to look for a building, maybe we can talk to staff, we have to put a motion or something for them to get more space, because I think there's no more space there for anything. And that's what I heard from a lot of people on the committee.
Yes, well, that's absolutely true. I get around through my lacrosse endeavors, different arenas and venues in Ontario, and some of the halls of fame that very small communities have, and I'll pick out Peterborough, Whitby, Brantford, Windsor. Just lack of better words puts us to shame. There's memorabilia around this town. I've got boxes in my basement that could be donated to the Hall of Fame. And, Steve Clark, one of our Olympic swimmers who is on our committee, he's got memorabilia, soccer, baseball, the different sports. And we do need a structure that we can put it in outside the CAA, and I'd just like to know the road I have to take to spearhead that so it is something that is drastically needed, and where it would be or when it could ever happen, I just hope it happens in my lifetime.
So, Councillor Pertini, I gave you a little bit of extra leeway there, but the clerk informs me that would be a new business item for discussion.
So
this
can
is
we
for
open
the
it?
announcements. And
So can we open it?
Mr. Mayor, it may be more appropriate maybe to add it as a discussion item in the Committee of Council next week, as opposed to reopening today's agenda.
So I'll add it next week for discussion and see what we can do. Maybe we have Vic Park coming around the corner.
Okay, thank you very much.
yeah. Thank you, Councillor Pertini, and thank you, Dean, for all your work.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is item 5.2. We now have 3 proclamations to be read today. Let me start off with the Tartan Day proclamation, and thank you to Councillor Bowman for taking a lead on this. We had a great event at City Hall for the flag raising. I know this was something very important to Councillor Bowman. The Tartan Day proclamation, whereas the Scottish people all over the world celebrate April 6 each year in remembrance of the Treaty of Arbroath, 1320 Declaration of Scotland's Independence, and whereas on March 9, 1986, the Federation of Scottish Clans petitioned to all levels of government in Canada to recognise the 6th of April as Tartan Day in recognition of Scottish forebears in the development of Canada, and whereas many people living in Brampton are Scottish Canadians or Canadians of Scottish descent, therefore I, Patrick Brown, Mayor of the City of Brampton, do hereby proclaim April 6th as Tartan Day in the City of Brampton, and encourage all residents to join in the remembrance and celebration of Scottish heritage. And I was informed by Councillor Bowman that when we had the Scottish flag raised on April 6th, it's the first time it has been flown at Ken Willen Square. So it was a great celebration. Our next proclamation is the Day of Remembrance and Action on Religious Freedom. On Wednesday, March 2nd, 2011, unknown gunmen fired a hail of bullets at Clement Shahbazbadi, Pakistan's Federal Minister of Minority Affairs, and the only Christian in the federal cabinet. He was assassinated promoting interfaith harmony and for his unrelenting opposition to blasphemy, laws, and injustices and intolerances they encouraged. Shahbazbadi died at the age of 42, defending the cause which he had dedicated his life. His untimely and violent death has left religious minorities in Pakistan, including the Canadian Pakistani Christian community of Brampton, in shock, fear, desperation, and questioning who will speak for us now. Whereas City Council condemns the assassination of martyr Shahbazbadi and all forms targeting religious minorities in Pakistan and around the world, and reaffirms its commitment to uphold the rights of religious freedom, and that hatred has no place in the City of Brampton, I, Mayor Patrick Brown, on behalf of the City of Brampton City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2nd, 2019 as the Day of Remembrance and Action on Religious Freedom in the City of Brampton. And I would note, to accept this proclamation, I'm going to call up Peter Botti, Tanvir Joseph, Noel Chaudhry, and Rohal Massey. Peter is the chair of the International Christian Voice, Tanvir, chair of the Charismatic Social Integration of Canada, Noel is the vice chair of the Canadian Christian Association, Rohal is the executive of the Pakistan Christian Times. And before I call you up to present this proclamation, I just wanted to say I think there's something very special about this connection to Brampton. I think for those that followed Pakistan politics, Shahbaz Bhatti was a hero on the front pages of newspapers around the world. But what you may not know is that his brother, Peter Bhatti, lives in Brampton. And that when he was doing his work, he would come to Canada and he'd stay with his brother in Brampton. And so he's now going to be in the history books forever as a hero for religious freedom, fighting for religious freedom at a time where it's been difficult in Pakistan. And I think it's important we celebrate that Brampton connection. And even when I was up in Simcoe County, I remember hearing about this incredible man, and I went down to attend these events to hear about his message. And then I think in 2011, when he was assassinated, it shook Canada because it was a badge of honor that you had someone as a real voice. And so it was a very sad day. I remember being in Ottawa at the time as an MP, and everyone was shaken in the House of Commons because he had become that voice for religious freedom globally. And so his brother Peter is here today. I look forward to presenting this proclamation. But having got to know this family, it's certainly a little bit more personal, and it's an honor to present this to you today.
On behalf of my community and my family and International Christian Voice, I would like to thank you, His Worship Patrick Brown and Honorable All City Council, those that make that proclamation about our hero, our martyr Shahbaz Bhatti. It is a great honor and privilege for us as a community and as a nation that our city is recognizing the person who gave his life for human rights, religious freedom, and that was the key object in Canada foreign policy. So, and it is start from the Brampton. It is great honor being a Bramptonian for us that recognition his service. Also, all of you know that he did not bend on anything. He did all their efforts. He has opportunity to stay in Canada offered by Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Jason Kenney that time, but he refused. That's called religious freedom and stand for the fight of the freedom. And he is not only fighting for the religious minorities, only Christians, he worked for all the people, those are marginalized, oppressed, despite of all caste, color, and creed. So this is good for us. And also, I would like to thank you on behalf of my community to Mr. Mayor and Councillor that you induct our friend, our community member, Joshua, in the city. So that is wise for us, behalf of Pakistani Christian community. So thank you so much for doing that one. Also, when we are doing great things, I have a small request. While Shabazz was the second home, when he was in Canada, Brampton was his home. And when it is the great sacrifice did by the Bramptonian and my brother, I will urge to the committee and council if we can make a park or any community center or main road on the name of Martyr Shabazz Bhatti. That will help to realize all our coming generation that people stand for religious freedom and human rights despite of all those problems. And it encourages our communities and our coming generations that what is the value is for the religious freedoms. Thank you so much again. God bless you all and keeping us all good work. Thank you again for Mr. Mayor for doing that one.
Well, Peter, don't go anywhere yet. There's a few questions, and just you let that sink in for a second. I remember the time when he was giving these speeches across Pakistan about the importance of religious freedom, being able to go and pray without fear, no matter what your religion is. And there's no better example of that than Brampton. We are the mosaic of faiths, but he was offered at the time if that he could gain refugee status in Canada because there had been death threats against him for the speeches he was making as a minister in Pakistan. And despite having death threats and being able to stay in Brampton, that accommodation was offered by the federal government, knowing that he could stay here safely. He still went back to Pakistan to make those speeches, knowing there was death threats against him. So you say he gave his life. He really did. He could have stayed here. He could have not had that risk to his life. And so it really is an incredible story. Councillor Dillon and Councillor Medeiros will be next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I just want to thank you for coming today. I want to thank the council and the mayor for the proclamation as well. And I just want to thank you and your family and the Pakistani Christian community as well for all that you've done for human rights issues as well. I know after his death, there was a dialogue started within Pakistan, and I had an opportunity in 2016 to travel to Lahore and Foreman Christian College. After his death, there was a summit that occurs each year, and within the summit, they talk about the white of the flag, which represents the minority community. And so there's been a dialogue started. There's been a lot of work done, but I just want to commend the Pakistani Christian community for doing so much to get this dialogue started. And I've seen some change that's occurred, and so, but it's with the hard work and the sacrifices that you guys have made. I was able to speak there and let them know how great your community is here, how much you've contributed to Brampton as well. So once again, I know the mayor has given his thanks, but I want to say my thanks as well to you and the community.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhatia. Really, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to have met you several years ago. And when I first got to attend the event, I just thought it was another event. And as I heard the story, saw the video, and I think the mayor really expressed, how meaningful and how symbolic what your brother represents. And really, it's the foundation of what our nation is, and certainly what the city of Brampton is. And I guess in the form of a question, my question to you, as much as we enjoy the celebration for that evening, I think the story here is larger and should be shared, and especially with youth, especially with people in our schools, especially with, when you think, for example, we have a committee that deals with diversity and inclusion, and certainly opportunity to hear your story. Would you be interested to come to speak, be it at public functions, be it at some of our committees, be it at schools? Is this something that you're planning on doing in the future? Just to get the message out, because the Brampton connection is great, but the story is so inspiring.
I think this subject is very close to our heart, and it is honor for us to be part of that committee or for presenting our thoughts about religious freedom and human rights. I will be gladly and humbly accept that offer.
Great. So I think offline we'll speak.
Yeah, sure.
Some ideas. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to also thank you. We met a couple of years ago on one of your fundraisers, and you do great things for the community. And I was hoping to be there at the last one. I couldn't make it, but continue your good work, and I'll be there at the next one. Anything I could do to help the community. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to add, every year in his memorial, Shabazz Bhatti Memorial, we are doing the fundraiser, and we use that fundraiser for refugees family, those are suffering in Pakistan and fled to other part of the world. So that is also to continue his legacy. If Council or anybody, it is want to help us in that regard, that will be also appreciated.
So what Peter just highlighted there was that the annual, it's the International Christian Voice Gala in honor of Shabazz Bhatti's memory. What they do at this dinner, and I had the chance to attend this year, they identify families facing persecution and help with them coming to Canada. And so I can't think of it something more appropriate in your brother's memory. Just talking to a few councillors here, your suggestion was we look at a naming opportunity for a park or a street, and so I think we could take that that we've referred this to the naming committee, the street naming committee, to report back to council. I think that would be a beautiful way to celebrate an important part of Brampton history and, frankly, an incredible global story. And so I understand there's no motion necessary from the clerk, but this will be referred to staff to report back.
Okay. So I have small application for this one. I can leave it here for the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have National Volunteer Week, which is from April 7th to 13th. We have a proclamation. Whereas volunteers in the city of Brampton significantly contribute towards building a safer, more secure, and caring community, individually and through many community service organizations and government agencies, Volunteer MBC Brampton's local volunteer center empowers volunteerism through awareness, education, and by connecting residents to meaningful volunteering opportunities. In its 10th anniversary year, Volunteer MBC has promulgated a charter of volunteerism to increase volunteerism in Brampton and neighboring communities. And the Charter of Volunteerism messages the ideals that are exemplary in volunteering, building connections, improving safety and security, preserving the environment, promoting health and wellness, and diversity and inclusiveness within our communities. And the City of Brampton wholly supports the Charter of Volunteerism in its ideals and message as an important and valuable call to action to increase volunteerism by residents and for the benefit of all. I, Mayor Patrick Brown, on behalf of the Brampton City Council, do hereby proclaim April 7th to 13th as National Volunteer Week in the City of Brampton. Now, I understand that we have Karen Strong, Jim Wigter, and Robert McFarland, along with a few others, in attendance, and I will present this proclamation. Corinne. The floor is yours.
On behalf of all of us at Volunteer in BC and all the volunteers across the beautiful city of Brampton, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging the specialty of volunteering and what volunteers do in the Brampton community. There isn't one day that could go by without a volunteer having an impact somewhere in the city of Brampton. Just imagine a hospital without volunteers directing the anxious families to the patients. The schools where everyone is playing a mentor role, and just everywhere, all the social services, the sports. There aren't any sports games that could function without the volunteer coaches. So we're absolutely, absolutely thrilled at Volunteer NBC to have an opportunity every day to match thousands of volunteers across the city of Brampton to numerous meaningful volunteer opportunities. We also have a learning center that helps to educate the volunteer coordinators and board of directors to help them to engage volunteers in a very meaningful way, to make sure that volunteers are accepted, that they can operate and bring their talents in a way that it's inclusive and that they're always learning, they're building skills. Just look at all the volunteers, the youth of today, and we work a lot with the youth across the city of Brampton. The ways in which they have contributed. We're 10 years old, and right from the very beginning, youth was one of our main focuses. And some of those kids that have graduated, gone on to do very, very meaningful roles in society. We're now looking at alumni, and because of their volunteer involvement, they're saying this is where they are today. We have a lady, Anne Mansour from Brampton, that's now a surgeon, and she said that volunteering really helped her to put the human aspect in being a physician. And we have a wonderful lady like Abira Saeed, who received a $100,000 scholarship from Toronto Dominion in order to be able to pursue her education. She started her own little diversity organization in Brampton. She came to us as a newcomer in grade 8, and now she's just on the verge of graduating from her scholarship, and will go on to play a very meaningful role. These are the stories that volunteers have to tell. So we're always saying volunteers help so many people in the community. But at the same time, it's a win-win because they help themselves in the process as well. And that's the message that we would like to spread across and continue to spread across. And so we're very, very grateful for this incredible opportunity. This acknowledgement by the city of Brampton and from all of you is very, very special. And we were absolutely thrilled to hear that the city clock is going to be lit up tonight and tomorrow in honor of the volunteers across the city of Brampton. And so tomorrow is another very special day for us, and a number of the councillors are going to be in attendance for our Voskers event, a volunteer recognition event that's now in its 4th year, where we recognize volunteers for the many, many different roles. And so thank you. Thank you very, very much. We're very grateful, and we look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow night. Thank you so much.
Not so quickly. I have a few questions. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and not necessarily a question, more a comment. That's okay. So thank you very much, and I really wanted to acknowledge all of the work that the volunteers do in the city of Brampton to make our city go round. It's timely that we are having this proclamation during this week because we have had a record number of volunteers apply for various committees with the city of Brampton. And for, I think, the past couple of days. The Citizen Appointments Committee, of which some of our council colleagues sit on, have been conducting interviews of all the outstanding volunteers wanting to contribute to the city. A lot of hours. And I can say that the caliber of the people who have applied to volunteer on these committees is going to make it very difficult to make decisions as to who's going to volunteer. We have amazing residents in the city of Brampton who want to contribute. So thank you for coming today, and I look forward to the award ceremony later.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Willens.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming in. I'm glad you brought up the hospital. It was about 92 years ago, almost to the day, that the hospital was built by some volunteer women of the community. And now we've got Memorial Hospital back because of those women now almost 100 years ago. I was looking through some notes from the mid-'80s that my father did a speech at volunteers, thanking them. And I think it says something like they get up in the morning and they do what they do, not because they're told by a boss, not because they're told by a supervisor, not because they have to, because they want to. So it's very good, and thank you for coming here, and good luck in you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I think there's said about tomorrow night. Is there confusion? I thought on our calendar is it tonight?
No.
The Oscars, yeah.
Councillor Williams.
I want to say thank you. Volunteers are the true meaning of it takes a village. And, you know, without having volunteers in our city, it really just adds to the feeling of connectedness. And, you know, I just want to thank all the volunteers. I created a program some years ago, free tutoring in Peel for students to enhance their academic performance in school. And it's strictly run by volunteers. And I think the volunteers need to always look at themselves as huge game changers, because they are impacting they are a direct impact to kids and their success in schools. So I'm so thankful for volunteers and the work. I'm just wondering if you can share for maybe some people who are watching, what are some ways that people can become involved in the city through volunteering?
There are so many opportunities. If they go to our website at www.volunteernbc.org, we have an actual database that lists hundreds of volunteer opportunities. So, I didn't even mention, but if people just want to try things out and volunteer at a festival, we have a number of festivals that require lots and lots of volunteers. Some people through Rotary, and Ribfest, but then there's all the social services, the mental health organizations, the roles that skilled volunteers, and we engage a lot of new volunteers, newcomers to Canada that are wanting to build their Canadian resumes. And that's why we thought that the Charter of Volunteerism was very important, because it really speaks to the responsibilities of the organizations, but certainly of the volunteers as well, and how together, as you say, we can build that village. And it really takes a lot of volunteers to do that. We have Habitat for Humanity, they just look at the great work they do. All of those roles are in our system, or they can come to our office right at here, Ontario, across from the courthouse, and we will have a one-on-one conversation with them to really identify what they truly are looking for. The same with youth. We're all over the schools and constantly engage them, and we have youth ambassadors that are helping us to spread the message to their peers in the schools as well.
Thank you. Can you just share that website again?
Yeah, www.volunteernbc.org.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow night.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And before we proceed to the next agenda item, I'm going to ask the clerk a procedural question. Councillor Peleschi has made the point that today is the day of Pink, is the International Day Against Bullying, Discrimination, Homophobia, Transphobia, and Misogyny, and Trans Misogyny across the world. And they invite everyone to celebrate diversity by wearing a pink shirt and by organizing activities in the workplaces, schools, and communities. So I will make sure that later today I wear pink to show my support for that type of inclusive society that we believe in. Do we need a motion just to celebrate that as well today? Make sure that Brampton is one of the cities that is acknowledging the Day of Pink and the International Day Against Bullying, Discrimination, Homophobia, Transphobia, and Transmisogyny. Would there be 2/3? Oh, and Councillor Williams, good for you, already wearing pink.
Hey,
Okay,
we got 4 of us.
that's purple, Councillor Williams. That's why you have glasses. Yeah. Will Council 2/3 that we also make a motion to acknowledge this important day? Okay. No, if 2/3, if we have 2/3, we can waive the rules. Yeah. Okay.
The mayor is seeking a motion to reopen approval of the agenda, which is a 2/3 vote to add this recognition and for council to acknowledge that, which is within the rules of council.
Thank you, Peter.
All those in favor? Motion carries. And make sure at some point today for those who aren't wearing pink to find an opportunity to do so. Okay. Moving on. So not on the consent agenda. We now have 8.1. Yeah. This was held by Councillor Palucci. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to direct my comments more towards the ICBL and the fact that I talked about this ICBL a number of years ago, and we had made changes to this going along with the process. But I guess my real question around the interim control bylaws that we put in place often. And it tends more to happen when council on the whim decides to put in a type of ICBL. And then at some point along the way, somebody has a little bit of an issue with it. It comes to council through forms of applications or delegations requesting some type of an exemption. And I think here at the City of Brampton, we've put in enough ICBLs to recognize that there are going to be people that do have issues with the interim control bylaws, like this being one of them. And I'm just wondering, in future, can we have staff report back on ICBLs as a whole, and what we can do at the City of Brampton to ensure that future interim control bylaws that we implement don't have the restrictions that have been implemented so that residents come and have to seek any type of exemptions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly report back. Perhaps it would be a good idea to do some sort of a workshop. We could have maybe more of a back and forth conversation and a bit of a dialogue about how ICBLs work and what their intended purpose is, and any options we can do to provide options for residents or businesses who may ultimately be exempt from the bylaw.
Okay, and it's not like it has to be, this quarter but I'm hoping that and I agree with you in terms of a workshop, maybe we can attach it to a future workshop that we're having to incorporate this in with something else.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
But I leave it up to staff to make that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we also held 8.2. Oh. Moved by Councillor Palucci. All those in favor? Motion carries. Seconder was Councillor Williams. Okay, 8.2 was also held. And who held that? Was that Councillor Singh.
Yeah, could I just get some clarification? I think I understand this. So we're looking at an exemption because somebody wants to build their deck. So, because Mary's Field is under review currently right now. So just wanted to just clarify what exactly is happening, why the exemption, because I would assume that the review should be done shortly because we just had the open house as well, right? So.
Through you, Mayor Brown, the ICBL, I'm not too sure off the top of my head, to be honest with you, when it comes to a close, but this specific exemption is for an existing single-family detached. Alterations to the roof line and to essentially cover, reconstruct and cover an existing deck. So it is an existing single family and alterations to it. So we are allowing that to proceed in the interim until the ICBL is complete.
Yeah. So just to be clear, so just the one exemption until the review is done, and if there's more exemptions, they'll come to council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor Brown, that is correct.
Okay, I just wanted that clarity. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, you want to move the report? Yep. And Councillor Dillon seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. So moving on. We're now at item 10, Committee of Reports or Minutes. We have 4 committee reports in the form of minutes on today's agenda. Under Council's meeting procedures, the committee or section chair introduces the committee reports or minutes and summarizes the matters considered and now brought forward to Council today for ratification. Councilor Medeiros, you chaired the Planning and Development Committee, which met on March 25th. The committee recommendations were approved by Council on March 27th, and the full minutes are here today for receipt only.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of Council, you have before you the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee. Are there any questions or comments? No. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilor Medeiros, seconded by Councilor Fortini, for the minutes of the Planning and Development Committee meeting of March 25th to the Council meeting of April 10th be received. All those in favor? Motion carries. The Committee of Council met on April 3rd. The committee minutes are here for Council approval. I will now pass the chair to the respective section chairs in order of consideration during the committee meeting to lead Council in consideration of the committee recommendations. Councillor Singh chaired the Economic and Development and Culture section. Councillor Singh chaired the Corporate Services section. Councillor Singh chaired the Public Works and Engineering section. Councillor Singh chaired the Community Services section. So not only does he get married, but he chairs a lot of different sections. Council will then consider a motion to approve the recommendations in entirety after all section chairs have concluded their summaries and any resulting council questions or debate has finished. Okay, Councillor Singh.
Thank you. Could I take them all together? Yeah.
Yes.
So members of council, you have before you the minutes from committee. Do any members have questions or comments on the committee minutes and recommendations? I see Councillor Vicente. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to bring up from the Committee of Council minutes motion CW 147-2019 that the following items to the Committee of Council meeting of April 3rd be deferred to the May 1st, 2019 Committee of Council meeting. I would like to request that Council approve a amendment to that clause for the date, to change it to May the 15th Committee of Council meeting, as there are some members of Council who will not be here on the May 1st meeting.
And I would just note, thank you, Councillor Vicente, for considering the schedule of other councillors. This is an important conversation. I know I'm at the Big City Mayors meeting in Vancouver. I know Councillor Medeiros has an obligation as well, and so we appreciate that collegial approach and suggestion.
So, do any other councillors have any questions before we vote on this motion? Being none, all those in favor? All right, motion carries. Seeing no further questions or comments, Mayor Brown, I return the chair to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Vicente, that the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting April 3rd, 2019, the Council meeting April 10th, 2019 be received, and the recommendations be approved as outlined in the subject minutes, as amended. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. Councillor Fortini, you chaired the Governance and Council Operations Committee, which met on April 8th. The committee minutes are here for council approval. I now pass the chair to you to lead the council in consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, member of council. You have the minutes in front of you. See any questions? And I see some names on the board. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Out of the minutes, I would like to pull out the motion that was passed related to the mailing expenses incurred since March 22nd.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is recommendation GC020, and we'll put it up on the board.
And through you, Mr. Chair, to members. So I understand that members of council are having issues with other members that have mailed out items to residents in the form of communication. I understand that some members have issues with this, and I'm happy to support the majority of council to change any of the rules that need to be changed in order to make members feel that they're comfortable with what goes out into the public. But what I'm not okay with is saying to those members that really haven't broken any rules that they'll need to pay back retro the amounts incurred. I support changing the rules if you want to make those changes and effective April 15th. I can support that, but I can't necessarily, without a report from an integrity commissioner to say that there was actually somebody had done something wrong, which I don't believe that they have. I can't support doing that to any member of council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor.
Councillor, yeah, you do.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just want to speak to this motion, and I've been doing a lot of thinking since Monday, and since this decision had gone through, and I just feel in my heart that I know I didn't do anything wrong when I mailed my constituents of Ward 7 and 8 about the gun buyback program. I had made a commitment during my election campaign that I would put forward a motion to have the city fund a gun buyback program to help get guns out of committee. So when I sent the letters to constituents of Ward 7 and 8, I sent those letters based on a policy that was in place that allowed me to send letters to my constituents. And mind you, after the 15th, that policy is still there. If a council member wants to use their whole budget to mail to the whole of wards, whatever, they have that right to do that. I also sent those letters using a budget that was voted on by previous members of council to my constituents in Ward 7 and 8. And when we had the numbers read out to us each month, the amount of letters that were sent for the month of March were still within the number of letters that were sent in the previous months. So yes, I know sending letters may be outside of what the status quo is here at City Hall, but again, the policy still allows me to do it. So that I know some councillors don't like that I send the letters to my constituents, but I think changing the rules that is only going to affect one member of council moving forward is wrong. And this change will not just affect me, but it will also impact the service that residents get from me as their city councillor. So to change the rules to only impact me, I think is discriminatory. So I have written a letter to the mayor and all members of council. I have it here, and I would like to add it to correspondence to the agenda. That's allowed. And I can pass this on to all members of council as well. Yeah, I think. So I think I'm just going to read it. So it is with deep concern that I write you this letter. My colleagues about a proposed change to the councillor's expense policy embodied in the Governance and Council Operations Committee report being tabled today at council's meeting. I've been thinking about the decision that was made on Monday for the past couple of days, and I feel quite unsettled by this recommendation. The recommendation from the Governance and Council Operation is to retroactively change the policy so that it has the effect of harming only one member of council, and that council is me. On its face, this discrimination and conduct is unbecoming of a modern and diverse city such as Brampton, and I trust that you'll ask our city solicitor about the perils of introducing a policy that prejudices one member. The background. The gun violence has been on the rise in the region and the city of Brampton in particular. I was elected to Brampton City Council on October 22nd. My campaign platform specifically and purposely identified a new program that I wanted to implement to get 500 guns off the streets of Brampton. The gun buyback program would have the city of Brampton offer $100 to residents who surrendered unwanted firearms to the region of Peel during the biennial gun amnesty. The idea was new for the Peel region, but has been done many times in cities across North America. The city of Toronto will be running their 4th amnesty and gun buyback this year. And at the beginning of March 2019, I introduced the motion to have a gun buyback program in Brampton, which was referred to staff. The staff report was slated for debate March 27th of meeting of council. After the meeting with the Peel Regional Police Chief McCord, he agreed to attend council and provide the presentation on gun violence and his planned gun amnesty for 2019 on the same day. So the letter. Community safety is the #1 issue of concerns for residents in Wards 7 and 8. I decided to write a letter to several thousand residents chosen at random to participate in the debate. I have attached the letter and the petition, which was mailed out prior to March 27th council meeting. And I have the letter so I can give to everybody, but I'm sure everyone has seen it. Anyway, the letter informed residents of council of what council would be debating, as well as including a chance for them to support my idea to get 500 guns off the streets of Brampton. The city clerk and the integrity commissioner both agreed that it was proper, legal, and within the right to do so, and within the rules to do so. Under the council policy, the charges for such mailing would be attributed to the corporate account. My legal counsel has advised me that the magnetized business card included in the mailing does not contravene the council policy, expense policy. I was informed that there was no such thing as an unwritten rule to not send mail to one's constituents. The local response. The local response was overwhelmingly supportive. I've received over 3,000 messages of support from Wards 7 and 8 alone. There were approximately 7 people from my ward who disagreed with the proposal, and they were invited to speak to council meeting and have their voices heard too. And I would just like to add that I've had extremely racially charged messages and comments made to me by some members of the community about this motion and about me trying to get guns out of our community. And it's almost like, how dare you, who should not know anything about legal gun ownership, how dare you come forward and do something to get guns out of the street? I think the majority of us would be appalled by the messages I've gotten. So the Canadian version of the NRA. Once the word of the gun buyback proposal got out, members of the Canadian gun lobby responded with online and vicious, cruel attacks on social media. Many were tinged with racist overtones about the root causes of crime and the need to profile racialized people of color like blacks and brown people. The criticism on Facebook allowed me to identify the cities where opponents to the Brampton gun buyback live, and people came from as far away as Calgary, Kamloops, 100 Mile House, Moncton, and Kelowna, to name a few. And I replied to some of these critics with an invitation to visit Brampton and have a delegation at our meeting on the 27th. No one accepted the offer. Several of my colleagues referred to these vicious, sometimes racist attacks as proof.
Line of order, Peter. We're being accused here, I think, no?
No.
Something like, we haven't done nothing racist. What are you saying about?
No. I didn't finish. I said you have to read the rest. Referred to these vicious and
Like,
sometimes
I
as
line of
proof
order. I
that the
asked for
gun buyback
clarification.
idea was not popular.
Okay, so one second, we have to have the clerk tells me we have to have a ruling on the point of order.
You can't be attacked here all the time on certain things. So if we're doing a motion, I accept it, but we can't.
I'm speaking to being attacked.
So one second.
Well, you said by members of council.
All right, okay, you have to read the rest of the sentence, man.
What I
never
heard,
said nothing.
Councillor Martini, was that the complaint was that members from around the country, not members of council.
Well, member of council. I just heard member of council. None of us, I heard, I haven't done anything. None of us have done so far, as far as I know.
Councillor Williams wouldn't say that.
No.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, some of my council colleagues refer to these vicious and sometimes racist attacks as proof that the gun buyback idea was not popular in Brampton, and it would affect their decision-making on the matter. This has happened.
Point of order, Peter, like.
This has happened.
Mr. Mayor, again, they're understanding her right to explain her position, but to say that members of council, not once did we ever acknowledge or refer to any comments coming which were racist in nature. We specifically talked about the cost to taxpayers. So all this other stuff
so we can go in camera.
Is here.
Okay, we can go in camera if you
I
want
would suggest you just keep.
Okay, I'll admit that.
And ask for clarification was asked by the clerk.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if a point of order is raised, and the mayor, as chair, if you've acknowledged it, and you've essentially given your ruling in terms of you didn't think that there was anything in there specific, then that's the ruling. The role of the clerk is to advise you as chair. So the mayor has ruled, and so the matter is dealt with, unless a member wishes to challenge the ruling of the mayor.
So Councillor Frattini brought up the point of question. Councillor Williams has said she would not make that accusation against the council, and has omitted that sentence that was said in error. I would just stress the topic we're having right now is on mailing cost. So let's not expand the scope of this conversation. We've already had the gun buyback debate with the advice of the chief of police, and so let's limit this to the cost issue.
Okay. So I'll continue to read on. On April 8th, the Governance and Council Operations Committee skillfully created a retroactive change in policy that would only affect me. By gerrymandering the rules, they are prejudicing my ability to serve the diverse community of Wards 7 and 8. The sole purpose of this policy is to prevent my residents from getting the service from their city councillor, and taxpayers know that the cost of mailing is being paid for by them. The policy of drawing mailing costs from the corporate account was approved by a previous council, and the cost of the magnetized business card, in my opinion, is lower than the cost of printing thousands of replacement business cards made out of paper, and it is and was the financially prudent thing to do. Believe me when I say that retroactively changing a policy because of an unwritten rule would be viewed by some in our community as a form of racial discrimination. And many of our communities have been the victims of unwritten rules. Unwritten rules about housing, where you can live. Unwritten rules about employment and how high you can be promoted. And unwritten rules about law enforcement and the justice system. I urge you to consider the impacts on the residents we serve and how your decision will impact the view of the people sworn in to represent them here at City Hall. And I thank you for your consideration. Now, I understand, I wrote this letter because I do feel that to change the rules to only affect one member of council, I think is wrong. And personal opinion, if you don't like the messages and the strategies on how I reach out to my constituents, that's fine and fair. But to go back and say, now, we're just going to change the rules because we want to hold you accountable to some standard that is unwritten, I think is wrong. I would also like to add to this that if we are ruling or making a policy, and if we're saying that magnetized business cards are not going to be allowed at Brampton City Hall, I think it needs to be written in the policy. I would also like to add that if it is not encouraged, if the council here at Brampton does not want to see councillors mail more than a couple thousand or 4,000 letters to their constituents, it needs to be written in a policy. It has to be spelled out. If Christmas cards are not allowed, it has to be spelled out because new members of council are at risk of being penalized for things that are not clearly spelled out. So I would just like to add that, I don't know how to do that, if it's added to the policy, because I know during the meeting we also discussed that as well, the policy, but I would like things to be spelled out. I think it should be clear, because many councillors have been at risk and have been questioned, have been sent to integrity commissioners in the past for making decisions and doing things that were not clearly outlined. And I think that's a problem.
Okay, I see a lot of people on the board, and I just want to add a comment here to hopefully change the tone of this conversation on this topic. First of all, everyone knows there's no more inclusive city than the city of Brampton. And I know every member of council and every member of council loves the nature of our city. So that's the starting point of this conversation. There may be people that express bigotry outside of the city, but at every instance we have a city that has expressed love over hate. You look at Islamophobia, look at transphobia, every opportunity that we can stand up for an inclusive community, we always do. That's the starting point on the conversation. Secondly, the issue is about cost containment. And when we had the debate over giving councillors their own budgets, one of the things that was raised at the time was that there's all these loopholes that councillors have that they can spend money. Part of the rationale that resulted in the councillor budget passing was that we said these costs would be included within your global budget of $200,000. So if previously, if someone wanted to send $10,000 out a month in mailing, they could, and they could spend $120,000 on mailing a year. And so this was about putting costs together, and each member of council is responsible for their costs. I come from a little bit of a I've talked to everyone about this. I know this has been a divisive issue internally. My personal perspective is that you should be accountable for your expenses within your budget. If someone wants to buy 3 desks for their staff, they can buy 3 desks, and it shouldn't take a rule to say that you can only have 2 desks. If someone wants magnets, they should be able to get magnets. There shouldn't be a rule that says they can't get magnets out of their budget and send it out to make themselves more accessible to their constituents. I actually would suggest that there should be less rules within this allocation, and if a councillor wants to send magnets, so be it, they're responsible for the cost. Frankly, if a councillor wants to spend less on staff, more on communication, it should be to their discretion. I know right now it's set at $10,000. If someone wants to spend $30,000 on communication, less on staff at City Hall to answer the phone, well then it should be their discretion, and they have to defend that allocation to their residents. And so I do believe every member of council should own their expenses. So I'm not suggesting that anyone should be off the hook. If you believe it's a good use of taxpayer dollars and it comes out of your budget, and you can defend it. And so I'm going to give Councillor Williams credit that when I raised this with her, she sent out an email to City Council and said, I'm not going to do any more mailings until we have this conversation. And I appreciate that gesture. At the same time, we wouldn't be having this debate today if we said that you can do more mailings than 10,000. Councillor Williams, if she wants to do $30,000 of mailings, as long as it's within protocol, she would own that within her budget. I think the issue is the 10,000 limit. And what I'd say, I think that's a compromise position, is that it's part of any councillor's budget, part of Councillor Williams' budget for this year, what has been spent so far, but we don't have that arbitrary line in the sand that says you can't do additional mailings down the road. What I would say is important, in every level of government, and I have this experience, because you know I've served at every level of government, there are protocols on what's allowed for mailing. When I had a mail-in as an MP on a provincial issue, in my old riding, I had to pay that back because it wasn't within the federal mandate. And you learn the lesson, you never do it again. You know, Councillor Pertini did some Christmas cards that he had to pay back that expense, and he learned the lesson. And I think the general rule is that you advocate on news of what the corporation of the City of Brampton is doing. That's acceptable. If you want to seek input, that's good, but there certainly shouldn't be communication that is against a decision that's already been made by City Council. Everyone around this table is reasonable, and I think we just need to remember that during this debate. I was worried this might get a little bit out of hand, and so I just suggest that as a compromise position. If there's a willingness that everyone's responsible for the expenses this year, but let's not have any of those lines where you can't, where Councillor Williams would be handicapped to do future mailings because of the 10,000 limit. She would own the previous expenses, but she would be allowed to do additional as part of her budget. I think that would be a compromise, recognizing that I believe councillors should be able to spend their budget as they deem appropriate, and they have to defend it to the public. And if you believe that's a good use of your taxpayer dollars, you defend it. You want magnets, you want an extra desk, you defend it to the public. That's my 2 cents. Okay. Councillor Pertini.
Yeah, so, and I agree with you 100%. This was not about the mailing costs. It was about what was in the mail, and the discussion was about using taxpayers' fund for campaigning. That's what the whole was about. It wasn't about the mailing. So, in member service, many times we said, let's stop it until the 15th, and each one does what they want, but we still carried on. This went on. Anyway, and I have no problem with the mail. But the comments about races and stuff, that's one thing I didn't like. Okay, Councillor Santos, because I'm not. Sorry. Councillor Santos?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You know, we've gone through this discussion since January in regards to councillors' mailings, and there's been an ongoing concern expressed by all of our colleagues around this table about this particular issue. I believe yesterday we clarified that, in fact, this topic was discussed 3 or 4 times. Yesterday, I believe, was the 4th time with respect to mailings, not just regarding one issue, but other previous issues as well. There were also concerns about campaign-colored magnets that were sent out in the most recent mailing between March 22nd and April 2nd. And also, I just wanted to state that it was only until March 22nd that staff has been able to start tracking councillor by councillor the total number of mailings sent. And in a 2-week period, 5,000 mailings with a campaign-colored magnet included in it, paid for, admittedly, by personal expenses, and then put into a corporate mailing, is indeed, in fact, somewhat questionable, and I think we have every right to question the cost and use of taxpayers' money. And all of these discussions have been happening within our conversations around budget allocations within the new political model. And so, you know, the code of conduct does exist to say that even though there are no specific policies and rules that say you cannot, thou shalt not send out, you know, magnets with your name and campaign colors on it, and thou shalt not do this. I agree with the mayor that ultimately we are held to a higher standard. And if your council colleagues who are elected by the majority of the people of Brampton have concerns, then certainly, you know, those concerns should be considered. And any accusation about this being a racist sort of attack is really out of line, I think. And so I support the mayor's comments about allowing the councillor to use her entire budget to do whatever she would like with respect to future mailings. But I do believe that based on how this has played out since the beginning of this year, it is our duty to uphold the code of conduct, our expense policies, and our integrity as council team to make this retroactive as per what it was starting March 22nd. That's not to say that, the councillor can use her additional budget within, her staffing budget or any other buckets within the budget to do future mailings. Go ahead. But the City of Brampton residents, the voters in our wards in the city, expect us to be accountable and expect that money to come out of the councillor's account and not through use of corporate services or corporate mailing systems that, are covered under the umbrella of the corporation. And I want to point out as well, especially when the communication in the mailing is out of line with a decision that was made by the council and a decision that reflects the corporation of the City of Brampton. So, I maintain and ask our council colleagues to maintain the motion that was passed at the Governance Services Committee yesterday. Was it yesterday? Monday. Because it is important for us to make sure that all of us are held to account for the level of spending that we use with taxpayers' money.
Councillor Maderos.
Thank you, through the chair. It's interesting because when we started this discussion at the committee back in December and continuing in January and February, the whole intent was to give caution to use these type of services at councillors' disposal in a responsible manner. And rightfully, the councillor in question referred to sent just as many beforehand, and we sit here now, and what was read to us not only attacks our integrity, attacks our purpose and what we're doing here. It basically asks, and I'm kind of disappointed with other colleagues, to put our heads in the sand and pretend that bad use of taxpayers' money was done. They want us to close our eyes and pretend that nothing has happened and it's okay to spend. And that's only what we found out from March 22nd. $6,000 sending out mail, which was not reflective of this corporation, was not the City of Brampton business. It was a councillor pushing forth an issue. Push forth any issue you want, but it was not the intention to have these mail-outs to use in that capacity. What I find a problem now is if you were to multiply this by every member of council, and we say 6,000, let's say 10,000 a councillor. So we're telling the community that we can't give them grants. We've denied community groups. We want to subsidize seniors' fare. And we're saying just right now, by mail, we would have spent $100,000 not reflecting the City of Brampton's business and day-to-day operations which impact residents, but based on what a councillor feels is the right thing to do. I almost feel, and I'm offended by the smokes and mirrors about the divergence of dealing with the content, dealing with the issue, where in fact we're talking about the expense. If you want to cover it out of your budget, and that's what we've done. And what essentially the councillor in question and my colleagues are asking us to put our heads in the sand, look at the taxpayer, and say, by fiduciary duty, I'm going to just put this aside. I don't care if people spend money. There is the spirit of what the regulation says, and there's the intent. And if we sit here and allow these type of operations and close our eyes and say, well, that's fine, spend that money, go ahead. That's fine, it's within your right. And then we sit around and look at each other and say, how responsible are we as councillors? How can we look the public in the eye? How can we go to our residents? So I say that it's unfortunate we've got to this place. What we're dealing with is an abuse of a taxpayer money, is an abuse of The intent was to communicate with your residents regarding corporate business, regarding notices that are important to them, that impact the day-to-day operations of this municipality. Any issue you want to take, any issue that you're passionate about, that's fine. Use your money, do what you want, but not taxpayers' money. So it's unfortunate that you've brought it to this stage. It's unfortunate that you're trying to diverge and use the smokes and mirrors to get into every other issue, where in fact what we're talking about is misuse of taxpayers' dollars. I would like a recorded vote. I would think we sent an important message to our taxpayers, because I will not sit here and pretend I did not see money being wastefully spent here at City Hall. Thank you.
Councillor Pelletier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess we're confusing two issues. One, a member of council spending money, and the other issue, a member of council providing information, communicating to the public something that other members of council didn't see fit, which isn't necessarily any different than a member of council putting out a media release criticizing other members of council on a decision that they made, but we're attaching a dollar amount to it. Let's talk about a dollar amount, because I don't need an education from any of you on how I should be fiscally responsible. I have the lowest budget in the last 4 years than any other member of council. So when I stand here, when I sit here and say that a member of council didn't break any rules and is in communication with their residents, as the member with the lowest expenses, saying that, we talk about communication all the time, and the fact that the city, the residents don't feel that the city does a good enough job in communicating. So you have a new member of council that has come and taken the bull by the horns to say, this is how I'm going to communicate to my residents. And the fact that you guys don't think that that's the proper way to communicate, who are you to determine that? That's not up to you. Watch your own expenses. Worry about your own expenses, because I worry about mine. And the taxpayers, the residents of my community, put me back in this seat. And I think one of those reasons was because I have the lowest expenses. And I'm proud of that. And if another member of council wants to spend their expenses on something else, it's in their right to do that. No member of council has broken the rule. That's what we're talking about. The rules are the rules, and they have not broken the rules. Because you're changing the game halfway through the process and making this retroactive, saying, oh, you did break the rules as of April 15th, but you're going to pay backdated as of March 22nd, that's not right. And that's what I'm talking about. I agree with Mr. Mayor in the fact that the expenses should be captured. I 100% agree with, I don't know what that dollar amount is, but I'm guessing that we should be taking out line items within our budget. We have the amount to spend, and now we should be taking out line items where we can spend that amount. And I think that's what needs to go back to the governance committee to determine if other members of council are in support of that, which it sounds like you are. So I would like, sorry, do I have the floor? Do I have the floor, Mr. Chair? So, Mr. Chair, I would like to separate the two. I'm fine with supporting the April 15th, but I'd like to defer or refer the matter of the retroactive to an integrity commissioner to determine whether this has been done in bad context. And I would like to support the mayor's comments in looking at our overall budget and withdrawing line items. Mr. Chair.
So we have to take a vote on that, or we're going to go through the speakers first?
But I asked for the motion first, right? Asking for a recorded vote. So I've asked to receive the minutes. Isn't that the motion first on the floor, City Clerk?
So through you, Mr. Chair, when this debate started, the minutes were on the floor. Councillor Pelletier, in his first speaking opportunity, said I think he wanted to vote on the items separately. The two items in question in terms of the retroactivity and the date forward as of April 15th, full cost accounting, are separate motions in the minutes right now. Councillor Medeiros requested a recorded vote on this matter, and Councillor Paleshi, when he was back on the floor, I think is requesting two things. He will need a seconder, and the motion will have to be in writing. One is to refer the matter of recommendation GC 020-2019, which is the retroactivity and related matters, to the Integrity Commissioner. And the second item escapes me at the moment.
Just on the mayor's comments about the line items.
My apologies. Through you, Chair Fortini, to members of council, what the mayor was getting at was the responsibility, individual responsibility of individual members of council. So if Councillor Paleshi is picking that up as a motion, then my advice would be that the mayor and councillors' expense policy should be referred back to staff and back to the governance committee for review, because the way that that policy is structured now is it sets out eligible and ineligible expenses, and it's very clear. But I think the debate that's occurring right now wishes to give more flexibility to members of council on that matter.
So we still have to take the vote on Councillor Medeiros first, am I correct?
No. So, Mr. Chair, if I can, if I still have the floor.
So through you, Chair Fortini, all I heard from Councillor Medeiros was a recorded vote. Okay. So on all of these matters, presumably, if that's the councillor's intent.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll stand down my referral to the Integrity Commissioner. I'll ask for the expense policy based on the mayor's comments to be referred back to the Governance and Council Operations Committee, and I continue to ask for the two to be split.
So still a recorded vote on that? So we're asking? Yeah. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair Fortini, I would suggest there's a number of members on the board. They may want to speak to those motions.
And point of information for the clerk, this will be helpful in the conversation. I appreciate the fact that Councillor Paleshi withdrew that portion. As mayor, knowing everyone on this, the fact that anything would be taken out of bad faith, I find offensive. That's not the nature of anyone on council, and I'm glad that that suggestion has been removed. Everyone here is working in good faith. But a point of information, this will be helpful. Councillor Bowman had previously informed me that this used to be taken out of a councillor's budget, and at some point along the way it stopped. And so what I'd like to know is if it was the practice that you owned whatever you spent and you were responsible for it and it came out of your budget, at what point did that stop? And given Councillor Bowman's been here longer, I think that would be helpful for those on council who are newer like myself.
Through you, Chair Fortini, to the mayor, I believe it may have stopped either at the start of last term or in the term preceding that. There was a point of time when all expenses, whether it's printing or mailing, would be charged back to the operating department and also presumably to the member of council. And then there was a reorganization, and there was central services that were created, and printing and mailing were consolidated into one budget. I cannot find necessarily a motion that speaks specifically to moving it from the individual chargebacks to the centralized budget.
So I just to add before I go to the next speaker, I remember before that it was deleted at the 2014 when we started. Our past council had to pay a lot of things back on bags, pens, magnets, because they used the expense budget. So that's why I want to raise it. We raised it just to come out of our budget, and that was it. Now we got it on hand. So it wasn't only about the mailing. It was really using funds on campaign. You can't do that. That's what it was about. So, Councillor.
Yeah, just to be clear, the issue I have is the retroactive. You know, if it's the ruling moving forward after the 15th, I'm fine with that. Like, you know, because that is the rule. Moving forward in the 15th, the payments for mail comes out of your council budget. No problem. But when I acted and when I chose to take on the responsibility to inform my constituents about the gun buyback program, I did that during a time where the policy allowed for me to do it because it was coming through the corporation. So just to be clear, that is why the decision was made that I did the mailing for my constituents, to let them know about something that is happening that is going to affect them. You know, the community has said gun violence is a major issue, and having a gun buyback program is an actual tangible strategy that could be used to help get guns out of the community. That's what this was about. The magnetized business card was my way of letting my constituents know that they can reach me anytime they need to. It has my name, the city email, the city phone number. That's what it is. And it seems like Brampton is one of the only cities that does this. I've seen magnetized business cards from Caledon. I've seen them come from our MPPs. It's just this council seems to say that we can't be doing that here in Brampton. And if that's the case, let's make sure it's clear so future council members do not get consequence for something like this, because it's an unspoken rule. So just to be clear, this has to do with me mailing my residents about an issue. And I think as a councillor, that's a responsible thing to do. And I just take huge offense to saying, oh, we're going to retroactively change things just so you can be consequenced. Now, moving forward, my budget is going to be significantly restricted, because $6,250 from a $10,000 budget for me to carry out my actions as a city councillor is going to be impacted, and then that's going to impact the community. So I think we need to be very mindful of what we're choosing to do, what we're choosing to hold people accountable for in the past, after the 15th. So if the Integrity Commissioner, if people feel that they want to look at the content, have the Integrity Commissioner do that ruling. Okay, I'm fine with that, because at the end of the day, I know I did my duty as a city councillor to keep my residents informed on issues.
Thank you. So Peter, just for clarification, on our new budget that we're coming up on is the 15th, are we still allowed to do mailing and magnets and letterheads and promote ourselves or not? Or we have to change our ruling?
Through you, Chair Fortini, to members of council, the current mayor and councillor expense policy today says that there are ineligible expenses, which includes matters that are, I think, itemized as pins, things. It doesn't specifically say magnets, but within the scope of that statement of ineligible expenses, staff have deemed magnets to be self-promotion, because that is what the policy says, and they are not permitted expenses under today's current policy.
So, okay. So that's what I wanted to clarify. So, Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry?
My apologies, I was talking to
Right.
down here.
So just a couple of, so in the letter, it says, and I quote, several of my council colleagues refer to these vicious and sometimes racist attacks as proof that the gun buyback idea was not popular in Brampton and would affect their decision-making on the matter. So then the other quote is,
Peter, I do want to, he's reading.
I'm reading from this because it was just.
Sorry, through you, Chair Fortini. I hadn't seen this letter until it was distributed. The mayor is correct. The purpose of this debate, when he provided some context, is on the Governance and Council Operations Committee, and specifically in regard to mailing costs, and whether or not they should be charged back forward or retroactively. That is what's before committee at the council at the moment.
She read this already. He's reading off the same letter that the council read.
You're the chair.
So can you do you allow me?
Yes, you're reading the same letter.
So
You're right? You're reading the same letter?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm reading one quote, and the other quote was, believe me, when I say that retroactively changing a policy because of an unwritten rule will be viewed by some in our community as a form of racial discrimination. And so I'll never question how anybody feels. And I really feel for Councillor Williams, if she feels this way, no one should ever have to deal with racism, especially from her council colleagues, as she's alleged. And so this is a very serious allegation, and I would highly recommend that if she feels there were if she feels that there was any type of racism against her, she should share this with the Integrity Commissioner immediately. But to make this allegation there should be some solid evidence provided. Because we have the city.
So Councillor Dillon, just after speaking to the city clerk, I understand Councillor Williams has already withdrawn that aspect of the letter, and so it was withdrawn, so it's not on the record. So we should keep this.
I just want to finish my comments. We have the reputation of the city to preserve. The letter is already out. It's public. We each have the reputation of individual councillors to defend as well. My own personal opinion is that this is not about race, and I'm shocked that it was brought up in one of the most diverse councils in Canada, but this is about mailing things that should not have been mailed, and I personally feel that mailing magnets is not appropriate. I've personally had to pay money back because I signed up for a business newsletter in the past term, and I was informed that it was not appropriate, therefore I paid the money back. And somebody mentions smoke in mirrors. I think it's hypocritical for some councillors here to boast about how proud they are about their expense accounts, but is now all of a sudden defending the right for one councillor to spend in which the way they would like to. Yet the same councillor cut all of council's budget in half last term without any consultation. Maybe I wanted to mail some stuff out. When I asked the councillor in the meeting last term why they would cut the budget without notice, yet also give away millions to a sports team, I was laughed at in the council meeting. So I'm wondering why all of a sudden the change of heart. I'm done.
Okay. Just one question. You said it's out? He's finished. Go ahead.
Comments were made.
Okay.
They were directed to me. So I didn't say smoke and mirrors. I am the one with the lowest expenses on council. I didn't put forward cutting the budget. Another member of council did that. So get your facts.
You voted for cutting the budget
Okay, guys. Okay.
in half without consultation through the chair. And all of a sudden you're defending it.
You supported buying 20 buses.
Can we recess?
You guys-
I'm gonna call for a recess.
One
I'm gonna call
speaker
for
at
a
a time.
recess.
You didn't mention smoke and mirrors. Councilor Maderos did.
Exactly.
Members of council,
what you
please
did was
address
smoke
your
and mirrors.
remarks through the chair, Chair Fortini.
Smoke and mirrors.
Okay, guys.
Your hypocrisy is smoke and mirrors.
I didn't say anything about smoke and mirrors.
Wait, okay, so I just want to ask one question. Did you say it's out? The letter's out? Oh, okay.
The letter's now public.
That's right. Okay, Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and fellow members of council. I really believe that history is really important because it establishes the context for this conversation. For the past 2 terms of council prior to this one, there had been numerous discussions about how council expenses and council expense policy should be continuously updated and changed. At one point, every single member of council was requested to pay back funds to the taxpayers of this city for inappropriate expenses. And everybody at that time did the responsible thing and owned up to their responsibilities to the taxpayers of this city. There is no motion or no rule within the clerk's office that states that I should not go to the building department and avail myself of their services to advance some personal project of mine. But it is understood that I'm not allowed to do that, not without the direction of this council. There is no spoken rule that our city solicitor is not to provide personal advice to myself, yet it's well understood that the city solicitor isn't there. Well, if there is, that's good, because we need that rule.
But even if the rule was not there, it's understood that the city solicitor is not there for my personal use. If we have a mailing office here at the city of Brampton that is to be used by all of the various departments for them to send mail under a corporate policy, then it is appropriate to do so. But when a member of council walks into that department with 5 letters, 100 letters, 1,000 letters, they need to understand that their position as members of council puts the members that work in that department, the staff, in a very awkward position, because staff are here to serve the corporation, and if a member of council abuses their position to avail themselves of corporate resources, that is very inappropriate. The letter from the councillor here states that we skillfully created a retroactive change in policy that will only affect them. That is entirely not true, because while I did not send any mail from the mailing office, my office did. And so I have been asked to account for 16 pieces of mail that were sent out through the mailing office, and I have a duty, my office has a duty, to pay the postage fees for those letters. The rules are the rules, but we are not changing the game here by making this retroactive, because here in the city of Brampton, we have a policy of asking members of council to do the right thing and to pay back for costs to the corporation that should be rightfully coming out of their own expense accounts. We asked staff to provide an accounting of all mailing. I believe it was from March 2nd, but for complicated reasons, we only have an accounting from March 22nd forward. We don't have an accurate account of what happened prior to that, and I think that's very important for everyone to realize. We've been talking about this issue since January, so it's no surprise that at some point it would come to this point today where we are asking for all members of council to agree that when their offices incur an expense, that we pay for that expense from our own accounts, from our cost centers. And so I will support the recommendations from the committee. I would not support any deferral or referral. I think that we all understand what is needed here. We need to be accountable, and I believe that that is entirely appropriate, and it's what the voters of this city expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Singh.
I'm going to call the question on Pleshy's motion. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace.
Councillor Pleshy.
You haven't.
Okay, I was going to call the question.
You too? Good. It's all over. Councillor Bowman. You can't speak no more, but go ahead.
I haven't spoken.
You haven't spoken. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. This has been sort of entertaining. We go from one extreme to the other extreme. We're essentially talking about mailing expenses. We all have an expense policy that we need to follow, and I'm all for, and always have been for, accountability and responsibility for your own expenses, whether it's retroactive or whether it is going forward. I don't think there's any question that the public understands that this money was already spent. We just haven't allocated it to a budget as yet. I do have a question in regards to the date that is being put forward of April 15th. I fully trust that nobody else here would go out and suddenly mail 5,000 pieces of mail in the next 5 days, but we're leaving that open to interpretation if somebody wanted to do that. So I don't know whether that date can be changed to as of today, even though the new employee plan is taking place on the 15th. that would immediately change the rules. I thought we had actually done that back in March. I thought that we had said, as of today, there will be no more mailings, but I don't think there was a motion to that effect, Mr. Clerk. No. What really bothers me about this is that everybody here is getting very upset. There's a tax going on against other council members by other council members. Nobody is ignoring this issue. The issue is here. We've got to deal with the issue at hand. We've got expense accounts. We should be able to use those expense accounts. I totally agree that there should be more written rules about what is allowed and what's not allowed as far as business cards, sponsoring events. We do have rules about that, and if they're not written, they should be. So I agree with Councillor Williams on that. But getting back to what really bothers me is we have a resolution process in this council. If you feel that some council member has done something totally out of hand, we have a resolution process, and that process is to go to the Integrity Commission and have them look at this. I don't know, but I don't think anybody here, possibly, has gone to the Integrity Commissioner. We're sitting here arguing for the last hour now about something that could have been handled through a letter to the Integrity Commissioner, and all we'd be talking about now is the expense policy. So I would like to see the date changed, if that's a friendly amendment to Councillor Paleshi's motion, to today. That way we are assured nobody else goes out and pops 100 letters, 1,000 letters in the mail, and that's all taken care of. And if somebody wishes to file an Integrity Commissioner report, that is well within their purview and responsibility to do that, and that's how the issue will be solved. As far as retroactive, I don't even know how to vote on that, to be perfectly honest, because there was no particular rule as written that I understand from Mr. Clerk that this could not be done. But I still believe it should be shown somehow in the expenses. I'm a firm believer that the expenses need to indicate every penny that every councillor spends. How they spend it, when they spend it, where they spend it, they will account for that to the residents in the next election. And if their residents don't believe that they did the right thing, the residents will have a say at that point. So I look forward to the vote. I would like the amendment made if that's acceptable. And that is all I've got to say on this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Maderos, you spoke already.
No, sorry, it's just for the mayor because he can't get on the board.
Oh.
Thank you.
You spoke more than once.
I haven't spoken to Councillor. I haven't spoken to Councillor Paleshi's motion. I was going to say on Councillor Paleshi's motion, I made the first comment on this entire discussion. I said the solution was that everyone should be responsible for what they've spent, and you can have Councillor Williams be responsible for the mailing costs this year, and the simple solution is change that 10,000 limit on mailing as part of her global budget. Every councillor's got a bigger budget. They can handle a greater responsibility of expenses because you have a bigger budget. And in fairness to this debate, when we had this 2 months ago, a few members of council said, I want to put the motion forward today. And I said, this is better to deal with at the Government Relations Committee. And they said to me, we had this debate 2 months ago, well, I'm concerned that there'll be more mailings done in those 2 months. And so if we refer this again to Government Relations, then it creates the same situation. And so because we had this conversation 2 months ago, as it's currently worded, Councillor Paleshi, I don't think your motion will pass. And I know you're trying to be helpful. The solution is that we accept what was in the minutes, that there's a responsibility for expenses. But what I'd like to send to Government Relations is, so don't cancel the retroactivity, but send to Government Relations to look into that 10,000 threshold. And that's a conversation, but we don't keep this debate ongoing.
We did that.
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable
So, Mr.
outcome.
Mayor, not to interrupt, we have, I think we've done that,
Yeah.
starting the 15th. The clerk maybe could clarify that we were gonna, as of the 15th, we could use our expenses after the 15th. That would be next week.
Okay.
And we're allowed to use it. But, so,
So I'm gonna ask the
Peter?
city clerk for some clarification.
we have to, member service, not to interrupt you, Mr. Mayor, we have to change some rules on what we can put inside. Until now, they're still there, and that, I did talk to Councillor Charmaine Williams. On the 15th, we bring it back to member service if we could change it. Until now, we didn't have it, and that's where it was going. To member service, back to committee, back to member service, it was going
Okay.
back and forth
Yes.
since January. So, Mr. Clerk, he'll clear it, Peter, on what we decide. I think on the 15th, there's gonna be some rules changed. We talked about after the 15th on the mailing, that we can use our budget. And it'll show online what we spend.
So the percent used on mailing can be changed on April 15th?
You can use as much as you want in your budget.
So through you, to Chair Fortini, to Mayor Brown's comments, when the budget was established for the councillors' office, it had a salary component and a non-salary component. The non-salary component was intended to be used with their existing $6,250 to be used for printing and mailing. But in conversations with finance, in fact, the whole budget that is available to the members of council, which includes a staffing budget of $199,000, can be used for non-salary if necessary, so long as the member does not exceed. Now, if members are using that budget for their staffing amount, then they may not have any money left.
And that's just to clarify, Mr. Mayor. So after the 15th, we have our budget, you're allowed to do,
Yeah.
but there's still certain rules, what we can use. You can't use it for campaigning on taxpayers' money. So we can use it for mailing if there's a construction on that road, and we want to clarify in the residence is going to be new asphalt resurfacing, we can do that road. Doesn't mean I send it to both wards all over Brampton. So,
Okay. So, hearing that the line will no longer be there, I would suggest that Councillor Peleshi's motion would not be necessary in that case. And I think what we have now, after an overly animated conversation, is I believe it'll be a fair situation going forward April 15th. You can spend as much as you want on mailing if you want, but you own it. And that's what I believe is fair.
Not as much as you want. There's certain rules what you could use the mail for.
Yeah.
You can't send it all one ward, am I clear? Like, if there's a resurfacing of a road, I could send it to that road without giving the residents what to do. Doesn't mean I'm gonna send it all wards 7 and 8.
Yeah.
When it's specific to that road. Am I clear? Let's clarify it. Or are we gonna bring it back to member service, we can clarify it better.
Through you, Chair Fortini, there is nothing specifically in there that puts limitations on the mail out. Presumably, it would have to be something within the jurisdiction of the municipality.
Okay. We'll bring it back to member service, just to more clarify it in the next meeting. Okay. So, questions been called?
I've been requested to withdraw, so I'm on board.
Okay. You're withdrawing? So, you're on board? Yeah. You're on the board. Go ahead. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chair, so I'm happy to withdraw. I guess from my understanding, what we want to see is, as of today, no member can do what other members are saying that they shouldn't be allowed to do, as of today. But April 15th, there's going to be something going to member services to remove those line items within the budget to make it a little bit clearer. Is that my understanding?
That's why I like to, what we can underline what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do after that. That's all.
But there's nothing in writing that says that they can't, as of today, you can't do that. So that's why I'm supporting Councillor Bowman's comments on making it effective today, with the understanding that as April 15th, the Governance Relation Committee will be looking at the expense policy as a whole. Is that my understanding?
So through you, Chair Fortini, and members of council, I think I'm trying to understand the motion that Councillor Peleschi is putting forward. He will require a seconder. Effectively, the first clause is to receive the minutes. The second is to take a separate vote on recommendation GC020, which is the recommendation to recuperate from members of council for previous expenses for mailing and printing. The third is the friendly amendment via Councillor Bowman to amend Clause 4 of the April 15th effective date for actual cost chargebacks for printing, copying, and mailing, to change that date to April 10th. The fourth recommendation is to approve the balance of the recommendations, and the fifth recommendation was to refer back the recommendation GC 022, which specifically spoke to the Mayor and Councillor expense policy, back to the Governance Committee for further review in terms of what's in, what's out, and appropriate line items.
So just to, like, I think that captures everybody's comments.
Well,
Aside from the one separate that I've asked for with the return of retroactive for the funding. But I think everything there is.
So you're okay for the return of the funding?
I'm asking for that to be separated from this motion.
Okay, so
And I need a seconder for this, and I don't want Councillor Fortini spending any money on notifying residents on road resurfacing. That should be you guys.
So, I'd like to have, I'm okay with it, but I'm still not clear. So as of today, we're allowed to do mailing until it goes to member service?
No.
So all mailing stops until it goes to new member service?
Through you, mailing does not stop. If Clause 3 on the screen carries, as of today, any copying, printing, or mailing services that members do will be charged back to their expense account.
As of today.
As of today.
But if the minutes are adopted, it would be as of March 22nd.
That is, through you, Chair Fortini, to Mayor Brown, that is Clause 2, which is on the screen, which is GC 020, which says that those members that incurred expenses as of March 22nd be required to pay that back.
And so what Councillor Peleschi is asking is that the date be changed from March 22nd to April 10th. I don't think that's what he's asking. I think you're fine with the March 22nd.
So that's the separation of.
That's a different motion.
Yeah.
So I think this captures everybody's comments, other than members that have said that the two councillors should pay back that expense through their budget.
Just to be
That's
clarified,
just separate.
I'm okay with as of today, but on the mailing part, it goes through our expense. And we'll leave that part, the other motion apart from the rears. But we still have rules where we could put inside the mail. So now, until then, we have to determine that in member service, come back. So, but until we go there, we're still allowed to put anything we want in the mail. So I want to clarify what we could put in there. Or else we're just going to continue this process all over again.
That's why I put in the date of today.
So let's just, yeah, but we have to clarify what's going to go in the mail, or else just stop until member service.
So through you, Chair Fortini,
We have to.
this motion and the debate is focused on cost recovery.
Right.
If the debate is on the content of communications, that is a bigger debate and is properly debated at the Governance and Council Operations Committee.
Okay, you know what, I'm going to call I'm a little bit confused here on this one, and I want more clarification. So is the other motion that Councillor Madero's asked for a recorded vote has nothing to do with this one?
Through you, Chair Fortini, I understood Councillor Medeiros asked for a recorded vote on whatever motions that were going to be before Council to vote on.
No, specifically receiving the minutes.
Can we take, you know
Okay,
what,
I
let's break.
apologize. It's Clause 1. And
Can we have a break? Okay, all in favor for a break, for a 10 to 15-minute break? All in favor?
So we have
It's carried.
Councillor Peleschi, what I was suggesting is I believe the motion is now redundant based on what Councillor Fortini and the clerk verified, that that discretion will exist after April 15th, that you can charge a larger amount in mailing to your budget. that doesn't need to go back to government relations. That's already been achieved.
We have to clarify that.
Yeah.
Or else, you know what?
So this motion will be unnecessary then, because we already.
That's right.
And of course, government services can look down the road if you want to have tighter rules.
We'll change that, member service, absolutely. Until now, we still have to stick with the old rules until we actually change it to member service and come to council for approval. And you're allowed to spend what you want after the 15th, but we still have to stick under the old bylaws. We can't start putting pins in there and pens and stuff like that.
The content will be clarified at a later date.
That's right. So all in favor of this motion, Martin Madero's asked for a recorded vote on this one, or no?
But is Councillor Plushy still putting the motion forward?
So, through you, Chair Fortini, I just wish to remind council, there was a proper motion placed to call the question.
So
And
that's it.
we are,
That's it.
I'm taking your guidance, and if council wishes to continue debating this.
No, the question was called, okay. So we're gonna have to vote on this motion. You need a seconder, Council Pleshy? Okay. So let's all vote on this. It's all together on this one here?
Mr. Chair, my advice would be, in terms of order of voting, would be Clause 2 first, Clause 3 second, then Clause 5, and then go back to Clause 1 and Clause 4, which is just sort of closing the loop on the recommendations. So Clause 2 is that recommendation GC 020-2019 be approved, and we have copied what that recommendation says coming out of Governance Committee. And there was a request for a separate vote on that, and as I understand from Councilor Medeiros, a recorded vote.
That's why we're voting on 2 first.
Point of order. If this, just for clarification, so this supersedes the actual minutes from the Governance Relations Committee, is that correct? This motion that's here right now. So if this motion comes to the floor and it's defeated, we still have to vote for the motions that were tabled at the Member Services Committee.
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, so we're gonna ask for a recorded vote. So which ones are we voting on first, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Chair, my advice would be to vote on Clause 2 first,
Okay.
which is to approve the committee recommendation, which is restated there. So if members are requesting, if we wish to do a recorded vote, we can do it with the electronic system.
No, we can stand. Stand.
A standing vote, a recorded.
We're voting for number 2?
A recorded vote has been requested on Clause 2 as shown on the screen only.
This is the same that was in the minutes.
That's correct. There was a request for a separate vote.
So it's not a motion.
All of this is redundant.
It's all redundant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Chair Fortini, a councillor is entitled to ask for a separate vote on a separate issue.
So let's vote on number 2.
All in favor?
Recorded vote.
Please stand to be counted. Showing in favor is Councillor Santos, Councillor Vicente, Councillor Willens, Councillor Bowman, Mayor Brown, Councillor Medeiros, Chair Fortini, Councillor Singh, Councillor Dillon. All opposed, please stand to be counted. Showing opposed is Councillor Paleshi and Councillor Williams. Chair Fortini, that motion carries 9-2.
And now we're gonna vote on number 1, 3, 4, and 5 all at once.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if that's the will of council, or if members wish to have an individual vote on individual clauses, that's what council can consider that.
Councilor Bowler?
Just a point of clarification. We've already voted on 2 in that past.
Right.
So we vote now, and clause 3, okay, be amended to state that effective date of April 10th be used for actual cost recovery. So does that supersede what we just voted on, saying March 22nd is the date? Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my advice is, while it may appear to be, that was not the intent of the motion. The intent of the motion that council just voted on was for those services and costs incurred since March 22nd up until the governance committee, that those costs be recuperated. So that is in fact what council's adopted. There was another recommendation, GC 021, which said as of April 15th, there would be full cost recovery for copying, printing, and mailing services going forward. This amendment says that that date will be April 10th today. So I don't see them as in conflict. They complement one another. They reinforce one another.
So just a clarification. So the March 22nd would only be March 22nd to today. That's why this is necessary for April 10th going into the future. Okay, I now understand.
And the recorded votes last on this one too.
The recorded vote's been requested on clause 3.
All in favor?
All in favor, please stand to be counted. Just on clause 3.
Oh, just clause 3.
All in Councillor Santos, Councillor Vicente, Councillor Willens, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Bowman, Mayor Brown, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Williams, Chair Fortini, Councillor Singh, Councillor Dillon. Mr. Chair, that carries unanimously, 11-0.
And now, Mr. Clerk, 1, 4, and 5.
And it's the will of council if they wish to take a recorded vote or vote on them separately or vote as a package by show of hands.
What was the package?
It's votes. All in favor.
Okay. Well, sorry?
Call the vote.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. 1, 2. Carried. 1, 2, 3. Carried. That's fine. Okay. So. You take all the names off the board and.
No, a second, Councillor.
Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fortini. I think Councillor Williams wanted to say something.
So, you know, I think I really do want to apologize to my council members. In highlighting microaggressions and talking about perceived racism or racism in general, I'm not accusing my council members of being racist. I think my council members are very forward-thinking and very in tune of how all members of the community feel. And so I will withdraw my letter because I do not want to make my council members think or feel that I am accusing them of such. You know, I think I just, as a Black woman experiencing the bureaucracy and have seen how people in my community have been treated under under the title of bureaucracy and being able to change rules and not knowing what the rules are. I know how it's impacted communities of color. So I just felt very frustrated. And also because I had a very hurtful experience on Friday and with racism. And it just brings it home to me that in this role, people of color have difficulties faced. So I do withdraw this letter, and I do apologize to my council members if at any time that I've made them feel that I do not think that I think that they are racist, because I do not. And again, my colleagues are so forward-thinking, and I think all of our opinions is what makes this such a great council and makes Brampton such a great city. And so I just want to say that for the record.
Thank you, Councillor Wallen. So, Madam, the minutes are still in front of you. Anybody else have any questions? No? Back to you, Mr. Mayor, for ratification.
The minutes are now already adopted.
Yeah?
That motion took care of that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Councillor Fortini. Councillor Medeiros, you chaired the Planning and Development Committee for council approval. The minutes will be presented at the next council meeting for receipt. I now pass the chair to you to lead council consideration of the committee minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, you have before you the minutes of Planning and Development Committee. Are there any questions or comments? No. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Medeiros, seconded by Councillor Fortini, with a summary of recommendations for the Planning and Development Committee meeting of April 8, 2019 to the council meeting of April 10th, 2019 be received, and the recommendations be approved and outlined in the subject summary. All those in favor? Motion carries. Our next item is 16.1 referred matters list. The list is published quarterly on the meeting agenda, and a copy is linked with each agenda to include a current listing of matters referred to city staff for further review and a report back to council or committee. Do any members have questions for the referred matter list? My screen is off. Anyone? Seeing no one, I have a motion from Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Fatini, that the referred matters list to the council meeting of March 27, 2019 be received. All those in favor? Motion carries. Our next item is government relations matters. Materials have been distributed electronically to the council yesterday by the CEO's office and the start of today's meeting by the clerk's office. Lowell Ruben Vaughan office, the CEO is here to respond to any questions if they exist. Do any members have questions, or should we take a motion to receive? Questions. Councillor Willens.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question to Lowell on the Modernizing Conservation Authority operations under the Conservation Authorities Act. Proposes to unproclaimed provisions, specifically, I guess, when it talks to regulation over areas of which the CA now have authority. But I think it's pretty clear on the other side. But will this have any detrimental effect to what the conservation authorities are doing now? As far as development in some of our green space or our natural heritage areas?
Through the mayor to the council, I think right now we're still assessing. I think this just goes in terms of this whole provincial governments in terms of review of all agencies, including conservation authorities. So we're still doing our assessment, and then we'll probably come back with a report or at least our proposed recommendations back to the province.
Okay, because I know they're talking at Partners in Project Green on this, I think, at our next meeting. So, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, Councillor Palashi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The gas tax funding, and I know we had that email from Mr. Sutton, I believe. I was frantically trying to pull it up, but I can't seem to find it. So from our understanding, Mississauga is putting forward a possible motion tomorrow to have the region do what they've done in the past, where they send the gas tax funding, the regional portion, equally to the area municipalities. And I guess we have here at the City of Brampton budgeted that money based on what we've done in the past, or what the region has done in the past. At Regional Council, the budget that was approved prior to the city's budget, it was explained to us that that funding was going to go to the AD system. So I guess where was the breakdown in terms of the regional budget, the allocation of that funding going to our anaerobic digestive system to ensure that we're not going into debt on the regional side, and for the City of Brampton then to expect what we deserve and with past practice?
Through the mayor to the chair, I'll refer also to the treasurer, but in terms of the timing, I'm not 100% sure that, well, actually I know that the announcement of the doubling of the gas tax was done after the region budget has been approved. Mm-hmm. So I would venture to say that they were not anticipating the extra money. Yes. So I would assume that the portion that you're referring to was the region's gas tax that they would have retained on that particular matter, not the Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon's portion of it. The report does speak to applying the full doubling of the gas tax to this without dividing it up amongst the area municipalities. Is that?
And just with respect to the budget in previous years, the amounts going to TransHelp as well.
So through the chair, Lowell is correct in that the region wouldn't have foreseen this money coming, so their budget would have been developed without the federal gas tax. The extra one-time funding, correct.
Right. But there's still the original amount.
There's the original amount, that is correct, that they would have forecasted to utilize for TransHelp or other services at the region.
And we took that into account in our budget, the original amount, but yet we're
through the chair. Yes, we've reflected a one-time doubling of the original amount that we would receive plus the one-time doubling amount, so to remain consistent.
At the region, that amount prior to the increase was budgeted towards the AD system.
Through the chair, I'm not sure how they've allocated the 17% original proportion that they would have kept for themselves.
Okay.
But I do know that the 83% that goes to the local tiers, a portion of that went to Brampton. We captured that in our budget, and then we also captured a further one-time doubling amount in our budget.
So both municipalities, the upper and the lower, budgeted the same original amount.
Through the chair, it's not the same dollar value, but we budgeted based on the past practice of what we received and how that allocation, 83% would go to the local tiers and 17% would be retained at the upper level.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Palacio. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. Well, so the province has announced 28.6 billion in transit. How much money did we get out of that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, initial pass of the announcement is none.
None. So all that money's gone to Toronto?
Through the mayor, yes, they are expanding some of the lines. So for example, the Young is going to be extended into Richmond Hill. So it will be extended into York Region. The other lines will be the Ontario Relief Line, which is going to be extended to, instead of starting at Danforth, will be extended through starting at Eglinton, and on the west side, instead of ending at Queen Street, it's going to be extended out to Ontario Place.
And that's all done now, or they spread it through so many years? It was supposed to be done this morning, so.
Yeah, I understand from the press conference they're saying within 10 years, which some people have suggested is ambitious. I would note that on the map presented by the government this morning, they included the Huron-Ontario LRT as part of this project. As we know, that's already been allocated and committed, so I found that a little surprising that was included on their new transit plan, since that's already an existing commitment.
And through the mayor is quite correct. So they are going to be spread out. The last project, which is the Eglinton Crosstown West, is expected to be delivered before 2031. So again, they're looking out 10 plus years for this. And again, obviously the province hopes to get this a little bit more accelerated.
So much for the answer. Okay, thank you so much.
I think Councillor Fortini makes an important point. I would note there's 3 years left in this government's mandate, and we're talking about plans up until 2031. And we should certainly be mindful as a city that there's no dollars in it for Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon, anywhere in Peel Region. So, good point. Seeing no other questions, thank you, Lowell. We have a motion from Councillor Vicente, second by Councillor Fortini, to accept the government relations presentation. All those in favor? Motion carries. I would note we have 2 items from Councillor Gurpreet Dillon. Two quick motions, 2 quick items.
Oh, I'm on the board.
Yes.
So which one are we on first?
Seniors Transit first.
Just a quick question. There's been a number of seniors calling, I'm sure my office and other people's offices, about the exact start date of the new reduced monthly pass. Just very quickly, Alex, can you let us know what the latest is on that?
Absolutely, through the mayor. In the report, we talked about an implementation for the $15 monthly pass in Q4 of this year or Q1 of 2020. We do have staff going back to see if we can do an earlier implementation. Once we can confirm some technical aspects of implementing this, we're hopeful that we can announce a definitive date, but we are hopefully going to target a September date. But again, until I can get some confirmation, we have to stick with the report dates. But we are working diligently and aggressively to try to get an implementation in September.
So hopeful for September, but Q4 is what the target is.
Q4 to Q1 of 2020. I don't see any big issues right now. Technically, we've actually had a meeting yesterday, so I'm hopeful that once we confirm a few things, we can come back with a communication to Mayor and Council on the exact date.
Thank you.
So.
Okay.
Next.
Your next item, 16.3.
16.3. So this is in regards to the council staffing model and the assigned seating. Some councillors have turned down getting additional seating. And so my request is that the money allocated there can be put towards additional seating if another councillor desires, which I do, a third desk. And so I want to move that be made possible today.
So, my understanding of Councillor Dillon's request, I think it's very reasonable. If one councillor isn't using his chair or desk and wants to have another councillor be able to use it, as long as there's two agreeing councillors, that's completely appropriate. I don't think we need a large discussion on this. Everyone's nodding their heads. Can we?
I'm on the board.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Fortini.
I have no problem since I'm not doing my office. I'm staying with this. If we had to spend so much money, if there's room, I don't mind, because I'm still not gonna do mine. And if I'm gonna redo mine in, say, 6 months on the road, I still have to pay it out of my budget. So the 60,000 was already allocated towards everyone's desks. If we're only doing 4 instead of 10, so the money's still there, so I don't mind giving my money to Councillor Dillon.
So, and that's teamwork. We're Team Brampton, and frankly, I don't think this even needs to come to council, but if we need a motion to allow for that, do we need a...
Through the chair, from staff's perspective, it isn't so much about the money, it's more about the space. I think in this particular example and this request, staff are going to look at it and ensure that we can fit the 3 workstations outside of Councillor Dillon's office. At the end of the day, we take direction from council, and if it's council's direction to make it so, we will make it so. The only cautionary tale that I would say is that today, we believe what councillors want. If tomorrow that changes and that model changes, and councillors want a 3 or a 4 workstation model, we are limited by the physical amount of space that's actually available to all of you. So if this trend continues and there's additional space required, we might have to look at additional options in terms of physical space for councillors. It might be a bullpen type of setting somewhere where a lot of your support staff will sit together in a separate area. Right now, we're not there yet. So the only caution would be if we start trending down this path, we're going to hit a physical limitation limit to the amount of space that we have available.
And
But for this purpose, we're good.
I'm sure Councillor Dillon understands that if Councillor Fortini finds a way to twin Ingrid and needs that desk back in the future, I'm sure he'll understand that this is an allocation made temporary. He has the right to adjust that in the future. Councillor Willens and Paleshi.
We can speak at the same time? Separate?
Yes.
Maybe this is a question that Peter can answer, the clerk. When we were talking about the furniture in our offices for our support models, regardless of how it went, we were given a deadline on when we had to make a decision on what we wanted on there. So to me, that tells me that after that, we was going to be coming out of our budget. How does this affect it? Because I'm not going to certainly give up a desk, but I can't get it back.
Through the chair. So my understanding is that work's already commenced. It's all being scheduled to be completed over the weekend for next week.
Sorry, Al, I can't hear you because they're talking down here. Thanks.
Sorry. Through the chair. So that work's already commenced. If this request now requires us to make a slight adjustment to that and there's some additional costs, we will of course capture that. I think the clerk's been very clear and we've been very clear. We're capturing all the costs associated with every council move, anything that's happening. So that will be reported at a later date regardless. If there is some substantial cost overruns or something, we will certainly report back. I think this is minor in nature. We'll be able to absorb it.
As long as minor nature is between two.
But we'll capture everything.
I'm okay with that. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just offer up my support with what Councillor Dillon's trying to achieve here sometimes. Unfortunately, like the mayor said, I guess it needs to be here, but you know, we as councillors, I think, need to have some flexibility and capabilities of our office and that relationship with staff to ensure that we essentially get what we need out of our offices. And so I support if Councillor Bertini wants to give up chairs and desks. I'm fine with that, as long as it doesn't change any space that's been allotted to other members of council.
So through the chair, I can neither confirm nor deny that yet because we're just hearing this for the first time as of last night. So it may have a small impact down the corridor where yourself and Councillor Willens are located because it may necessitate the need of moving down a couple of feet. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to be significant, but until they actually look at it, there's building code requirement specification that we need to meet. I don't think it'll have an issue, but it might have a small impact in terms of sort of moving you down a couple of feet type of thing for those workstations, but it won't be anything significant.
So now it's an issue. Only because in our area we're going to be housing some of the other councillors' cabinets, printer, water cooler, plus we have this beam that's an issue, plus we have a window that can't be covered. So we already have a limited amount of space. And on the design that was provided to Councillor Willens and myself, you know, we worked with staff to get the best possible outcome for what we require. So I support what Councillor Dillon is trying to do. We and staff have already put a lot of work into outfitting our needs, which are, I think, already a little bit smaller in nature as to other members, but it fits what we want. So if we can just have that open dialogue, and if it's inches, you know, and if it fits, as long as, you know, we have a look at that, I support that.
So I think it's fair to say that staff can take that as direction to try to keep it to the existing space allocations as much as possible. And I see Al nodding that they'll attempt to achieve that. Okay. Councillor Fertini.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a couple of maybe a suggestion. Maybe just meet with him and see upstairs, and if it could be done, it could be done. Because I think he's on the corner there. I think there's lots of room. Thank you.
Councillor Dillon.
It is fine. I'm just going based upon the map. I think there's room. Obviously, you don't want to impede on anybody else's space. If you can move an inch or two to the side, I don't think that's a big deal. But obviously, we don't want to impede on where the other councillors' assistants are. But as Councillor Bertini mentioned, hopefully we can have a discussion soon upstairs.
And I know Councillor Dillon, despite seeing him hug Councillor Fleshy about half an hour ago, no one's trying to take anyone's space. This is a simple request, and let's not overcomplicate it. So all those in favor? Okay. Staff has heard the direction. Okay. Public question period. Now we can deal with item 19. This is where we invite members of the public to come forward to the podium and ask any questions about any decision made by council at today's meeting. There's a 15-minute time limit for questions and answers. If there are any questions from the public about a decision made by council at today's meeting, please come forward, state your name for the meeting record, and your questions succinctly related to one of council's decisions. Seeing no one? No. Babu's not walking towards the microphone. Although I know he does want to wish his Maple Leafs the best of luck as well. Okay. Seeing none, we're now at the portion of the meeting dealing with the adoption of city bylaws to give effect to council decisions made at this meeting. In previous meetings, I have a motion from Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Fertini. And this is for bylaws 71, 2019 to 78, 2019. For the meeting of April 10th, 2019. All those in favor? Motion carries. Our next item of business is closed session business. And I'm going to suggest, I have the motion to go into closed session, but maybe we can take a 20-minute recess to eat and then go up to the meeting room. Yeah. Okay. So I have a motion by Councillor Pertini, seconded by Councillor Bowman. For minutes closed session, City Council March 27th, minutes closed session, Committee of Council April 3rd, 21.3 litigation or potential litigation matter, 21.4 advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, 21.5 advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, 21.6 advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, 21.7 for security of property of the municipality or local board in a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on behalf of the municipality or local board. All those in favor? Motion carries. And for, how long do folks want for lunch? 30. 1 o'clock. I'm back at 1 o'clock. Camera session. The meeting is now in the continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report in the public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session today, I wish to report the following. 21.1, these minutes were acknowledged by Council. 21.2, these minutes were acknowledged by Council in terms of the Committee of Council. 21.3, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before an administrative tribunal affecting the municipality. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. 21.4, this item was considered in closed session and no direction was given to staff. 21.5, this item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. 21.6, this item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. 21.7, this item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. Okay, our next item of business is item 22, confirming bylaw. I have a motion from Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Willens, to approve the confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings and decisions from this meeting. All those in favor? Motion carries. Our last item of business is item 23, adjournment. Thank you, members, for your respectful consideration and debate during today's council meeting. Council is next scheduled to meet Wednesday, April 24th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. and Wednesday, May 8th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m. I have a motion to adjourn from Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Willens. All those in favor of adjourning? Motion carries.